June 4, 2024 at 6:00 p.m. in the Board of Alders Chamber located at 165 Church Street, second floor, New Haven, Connecticut, to hear and act on the following items. 1. OR 2023-0040. Ordinance amendment of the New Haven Board of Alders to ordinances to section 20-796 et sec of the Code of Ordinances of the City of New Haven, updating sections of the Civilian Review Board ordinance. Per order, the Honorable Richard Furlow, City Vice Chair, attest Honorable Michael Smart, City Town Clerk. These items are on file and available in the office of the City Clerk located at 200 Orange Street, room 202, New Haven, Connecticut, 06510. For accessibility related accommodations, please call 203-946-7651 voice or 203-946-8582 TTY-TDD. Public comment or testimony may also be submitted via email to publictestimony@newhavenct.gov before 2:00 p.m. on the day of the meeting. This meeting may be viewed on the New Haven Board of Alders YouTube page.
Thank you, Alderman Shan. Welcome to committee members. I'll ask the committee to introduce themselves, starting from my right.
Alder Jeanette Morrison, Ward 22, Dixwell.
Alder Carmen Rodriguez, Ward 6.
Alder Adam Marchand, Ward 25.
Alder Richard Furlow, Ward 27.
Alder Evelyn Rodriguez, Ward 4.
Alder Eli Sabin, Ward 7.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you for being here this evening. Thank you to the public for coming. Just a little bit of housekeeping as we're calling the presenters. You'll find a microphone in front of you. There are words on the mic that you can't see. Those words say, "Do not touch." And so if you would just speak clearly into the microphone, I think they're already pretty well positioned to be able to hear you well. If they go out, just keep talking and we'll make the adjustment for you so that we don't get that loud piercing sound that causes everyone to just go into panic, okay? So with that, we will call our presenters to come forward, please. We'd like to recognize Alder Redenti being with us this evening, who's also the representative of the Civilian Review Board. Thank you for being here. As you're coming, and once you get settled, if you would give us your name and address for the record, it would probably be good. Why don't we have a full table? Yes, so it'd be good. Why don't we have our Corp Counsel come as well as our chiefs, representatives, so that this way we don't have to stop and call you up.
Yes, sir.
If we have any questions. There's a sign-up sheet on the table to your left. If anyone would like to testify regarding this matter, you can sign up on the table. To your left, which is under the third mayor of the city of New Haven. We'll start here. You can have your name and address for the record. We'll go straight down, and then you'll be presenting first.
I think, Chair.
Okay, great.
My name is Beth Merkin. I'm the attorney for the CRB, and I reside in Guilford.
Anne Marie Rivera Barrios, 19-21 Chester Street, New Haven, Connecticut, 06513.
Catherine Lamar, Deputy Corporation Counsel for the City of New Haven. My business address is 165 Church Street.
Carl Jacobson, Chief of Police, 15 West Philly Road, New Haven.
Monique Bectana, Assistant Chief, 1 Union Avenue.
Thank you. You have the floor.
Good evening. My name is Anne Marie Rivera Barrios. I come before you today as the Civilian Review Board Chair, a mother, and a member of the community. I want to first thank the alders for taking the time to hear us regarding the requested ordinance changes. We have truly taken the past recommendations seriously. I want to thank the Police Chief Jacobson, Assistant Police Chief I'm sorry.
You got it.
Assistant Police Chief Zanelli, Assistant Police Chief Etienne, and Lieutenant Augusto, and all the members of Internal Affairs for working with us closely to develop the most effective plan in the best interest of the New Haven residents. Police Chief Jacobson has been open to conversations and discussions regarding ordinance changes, and saying that we have some mutual agreements on some items and come here tonight to ask the Board of Alders to move forward with passing these items. I will now turn it over to Attorney Merkin, who will review these items with you. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, and good evening again. I want to start with an apology because we
So what we're gonna do, and I know I said don't touch.
I know I was going
But we're gonna trust you to swivel that. If it makes a loud noise, then, okay, yeah, we'll blame it on the statement. There we go.
So I wanted to begin with an apology by saying that I submitted a bunch of 2 separate documents this morning, very, very late in the game. And so I appreciate that you may not have had time to review them carefully. They're pretty dense. I'm going to try to take the time to walk through the changes this evening. But the reason we were kind of so late in submitting those documents is that we've been working very closely with the chief and his staff to try to discuss these changes and make some agreements in areas where we could. So we met yesterday at 4 o'clock, Chief, I think was that?
Yes.
Yeah, so we were kind of right up to the wire, really trying to hustle to be ready to present something to you all, kind of in partnership with the New Haven Police Department. And I too appreciate their team, the chief and his staff, for taking the time to work with us to try to make these changes. So I'm going to just start by passing out a chart, which I think will help us all place into context some of the conversation that we're about to have.
You can just hand it and we'll
Okay.
pass it down. Yep. Thank you.
Chief, did you put this out?
No, I wasn't able to get it.
Okay.
Are there any other?
Yes, everyone has. Mr. Carlo, do you have?
I'll share.
I've got it.
Is it okay? Yep, great. Thank you.
So part of our goal in addressing some of the provisions in the current ordinance is to strengthen our voice in the complaint process. And so I think to better understand what those changes would mean, it's important to first look at the current complaint process as it exists right now, based on the language that we have in the ordinance and the department's interpretation. So the first step, obviously, is that a citizen or a civilian files a complaint. There are a lot of ways a civilian can do that. They can do it online. There's a location outside in the lobby of the police department where they can file a complaint. Our particular website has a link where they can file a complaint, but that's the first step that initiates the investigation process. Once a complaint is filed, the CRB must receive a copy of that complaint within 5 days. That's the language in the current ordinance. And the department has been compliant with that requirement. What they had been doing up until recently is redacting the identification information or the contact information of the complainants. Through conversations with the chief and his staff and with Attorney Lamar, they have now changed that policy, and they are providing us with an unredacted copy of the complaint that's filed. So this will allow us to have some contact with the complainant from day one, and reach out and explain what our role is and what the process that they can expect will be. Step 2 is that the Internal Affairs investigates. Put on my different glasses. Let's see. The IA unit will investigate the complaint. Okay. They review all of the evidence, the police reports, statements, photographs, body cam footage. They speak to the complainant. They speak to the officers involved. And then they are very careful to look to see whether there's any breach of any general orders or police policy. And in that process, they will prepare a report and they will lay out their findings. If they feel that there was any type of violation of police department policy, they will sustain an allegation. If they believe that there was no breach or no violation, they will classify that as either unfounded, exonerated, not sustained, or, am I missing a category, Chief?
There's a couple of categories.
Unfounded.
Unfounded, summary action,
Misconduct not related to
misconduct,
original
not
complaint.
reconciled. Yeah.
So they have a different categories of findings where there's really no basis to support the complaint. So after that investigation is completed, IA will generate a report, and again, they will lay out all of their investigative efforts and their findings, and they'll conclude there is either no wrongdoing or yes, there was. Okay. Once that report is generated, we are immediately notified because it is at that point that the CRB can then become involved with the investigative process. Okay. We're not permitted to have any involvement up until the time that IA has completed its report. So once that is shared with us, our members can go and review the file and the report and things like that. Also at that time, if there is a finding of no wrongdoing, exonerated, unfounded, things like that, IA will turn over that report to Chief Jacobson. And within, Chief, you can speak to this, within a couple of days, I guess,
Yeah, after I review.
he will review it. If he concurs with the finding that the matter that it was unfounded or exonerated, he will close the file. Okay, it puts us in a bit of a predicament because when we then have jurisdiction to review the case, in many cases it's already been closed. Okay, in cases where IA makes a finding of exonerated or unfounded, by the time we can have access to that file, the chief has already signed off and closed the case. Therefore, when we conduct our own investigation, if our board members, after reviewing the file, disagree with the outcomes that were reached by the IA people, there's really no vehicle for us to kind of change that or have input into the process because the case has been closed. So this is the dilemma, this is the problem that we kind of find ourselves in because of the timing of when we're allowed access to that file and the timing within which they close the case if they find no wrongdoing. We're kind of at a spot where we can't do much or say much. We can review the file, we can as a group discuss it. We can say, look, we disagree with IA's findings, but at that point the case has been closed and we really have no voice. So what we're trying to do here in looking at some changes in the ordinance is to allow for us to have some input into the decision making before it already happens. Okay, so that's the kind of the current layout, the way that the department interprets the ordinance as it's written right now. Again, we think that there are some problems in that interpretation as it's written, and so we're trying to kind of make some changes to allow for us to have an impact over the complaint review process. Are there any questions about this information, this chart? Chief, do either of you guys have anything to add with this?
Well, I mean, it's not just our interpretation, it's what's been going on since the inception of the CRB.
Right.
And I don't, like, we both agree that something should happen, we just don't agree exactly what should happen, right? Because we're looking at, I'm held to, first of all, we don't want these officers to have cases open for a long time. And like when we were in front of you guys just a couple months ago, we both talked about getting both of our houses in order so that we'd have quicker investigations. I'm still not there, but when I get to the point, we're hoping that an IA investigation takes no more than 90 days. then when I sign off on it, I have 90 days to discipline. So that officer is kind of on the hook for 6 months, right? We're still not there yet. When I make sergeants on Friday, thank God, I will be putting another sergeant in IA. We put 2 more detectives in IA, so we're trying to catch up. And the same with the CRB. They haven't hired an investigator yet. I like the investigator model, but one's not hired yet. And there's a couple things in here that might work, but we're not there yet. But this is, the issue I have is going back to labor and the union in changing some of this stuff when we're not doing this as it's laid out now. You know what I mean? So, but there's definitely, I'm concerned about timeline, but if we can agree to a timeline, I think, and that's what we've been talking about the last few days, agreeing to a timeline that gets these cases done quicker, gets their recommendation prior to me closing it, so that they have their input even on unsustained cases.
Right.
Where does, Chief, and thank you for that, thank you for presenting thus far. Where does the police commission fall in with this 1 through 4?
So it will be after the CR, so if I close the case and it's gonna be disciplined more than 15 days, it goes to them. So not a lot of our cases go that way, but, unfortunately in my 2 years, a lot have, in firing 7 people, those all ended up on the police commissioner's table.
So if I can just follow up, the commission doesn't have jurisdiction over cases that were unfounded. So the commission is only looking at cases where he's found some sort of disciplinary problem. The problem that the board has is that if the IA report says unfounded, we don't have a mechanism where we can review and have some sort of difference of opinion.
But the board of police commissioners is given all the unfounded cases. They're reviewed. They give their recommendations back to me. We have arguments about whether it should have been founded or not.
Okay, then
So, some are pretty heated too. So I've been able to kind of look at what they're looking at, and I think we all agree when the officers are treating the community disrespectfully, that's an issue, even if there's not a direct failure of protocol or procedure. So they do get them and they do discuss them. And that's something I would like to do with them, which we can do without changing the ordinance, where if you do have, so one of the things I was thinking about when you were presenting is, I've never gotten feedback from them saying, oh, why did you not sustain this? Because we think you should have sustained it. So we've never been there yet either, right? So
what I would like to do, just as we're going forward, because we have a lot of people at the table, if you would just direct your conversation to us, because we have to vote, and then this way we won't have any back and forth, and I won't have to make this thing.
no, we're very cooperative.
Well, it's just the rules of the board. So when you're in committee, yeah, it's our formality. You have to address us. Anything else to add, Chief? On this topic?
Not on this topic.
Okay.
No, sir.
So we'll go back to your presenting. Is everyone clear where the police commission falls in? Are there any questions along that line? And then we'll stop every so often and ask questions, because there's a lot that I think you're going to cover. And so we'll try to keep it rolling, but make sure that all of this is staying in tune. Okay, continue, please.
So I'm going to just point attention to page 6, subparagraph E.
I think it's touch.
Can I make it bigger?
I think you can. You can
Just
tell.
like this.
Okay. Okay. So, subparagraph E, the black language, which is already in the ordinance, to me is very important. Okay, it says the police chief shall not make a decision regarding I put in disposition, regarding a civilian complaint until she or he has received the findings and recommendations of both the CRB and internal affairs. So it is our position that even the ordinance as it is written right now should prohibit the chief from closing a case until he hears from us as to whether or not we agree or disagree with the IA findings. So, based upon that language, I wanted to kind of develop in other parts of the ordinance and highlight kind of the importance of that. And I built it in throughout other parts of the ordinance. But my point is, it's already there. It's already there. I think that we need further conversations, even if there's a delay in ruling on these provisions about how to enforce that and how to comply with that, but it's there. Okay, so you'll see right at the top, and I'll just kind of walk you through provision by provision. Paragraph B, again, is the important part of what we're talking about now. That it is our position that the CRB must have an opportunity and have time to review the file and make appropriate recommendations before the chief closes the case, particularly in cases where there's a finding of no wrongdoing. So we built.
Let me jump in and ask, because we heard from the chief the length of time that it takes and to not have an officer just kind of out there waiting. How long will it take for you to coordinate a decision?
Well, we don't have access in the first 90 days, which we believe maybe we should, and that's addressed in a different provision. We'll get to it. We're gonna have to hustle. We're gonna have to hustle. I proposed within 45 days. The blue lettering was the result of conversations that I had with the chief. He originally thought 30 days would be appropriate to keep the case open for a certain period of time after that IA report is turned over. Okay, whether it's 30 days or 45 days, either way, it's going to be tight for us because we're going to be looking at the file, we're going to be looking at body cams, we're going to have conversations as a group about whether we agree or disagree with the findings. And then if we disagree, we're going to have to prepare something in writing to share with the chief. So we're asking for 45 days. I know the chief originally proposed 30. But we wanted to build in, yes, some time frame, a reasonable time frame, which would allow us to do our job, review the file, and provide feedback before the case is closed.
What's the blue mean?
Yeah, too many colors.
Red, blue,
so the red was my new language. The blue is the result of recent meetings that the chief and I have had.
Okay, so the red is new language, the blue is new language.
That's a very good way of saying it, yes. The blue is language that's the result of the meetings that we've been having.
Okay, I'll just say them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to ask a question to our corporation counsel regarding the collective bargaining agreement with the police department. I don't know if that's available right now or if it's been reviewed ahead of this meeting, but I'm wondering if the number of days that the chief has to act on IA complaints is written somewhere in contract, if that's something that is an issue as we're looking at this.
That's an excellent question. Unfortunately, I am not the Director of Labor Relations, and so I really can't answer that question for you. And I have been instructed by the Corporation Counsel to refer questions concerning the collective bargaining agreement to the Director of Labor Relations. I don't believe she was invited to this meeting. She did know about it, but I don't know if she's available.
So I can answer that from my interpretation. We have 90 days to do an investigation, but we can ask for, IA can ask for extensions, which we've been doing a lot. But if you fail to ask for an extension in a timely manner before the 90 days is up, then the union, there's something in the union contract that says, I'm not able to discipline them after that. So we're really watching these timelines and trying to make sure we re-up and approve. And then the CRB is getting all that information, correct? When we do have a re-up. Then, so say we have a case closure and it's sustained. If it's not sustained, the case is over. If it's sustained, then I have 90 days to therefore discipline. So before I became chief, I don't really know what was going on, but there wasn't enough time for them to, so I closed the case, the chief closed the cases, they don't, and he or she has to make a discipline in 90 days. Before, and I did it once by accident, we would just make a discipline in 2 weeks. So what I made a deal since Attorney Merkin came on, we're gonna give you that 80 days to do your investigation and make sure I get my recommendation before I discipline someone. So right now, there's a couple that are out there that we're waiting to hear back on the recommendation. The date's set for the end of July. So even if you finish it in, say it's a quick investigation, the cop was rude to me. And remember, this was all created, this ordinance, when there wasn't body camera and as much information as we have, right? A lot of them are cut and dry. He was rude to me. He said the F word, whatever. You watch the body camera, it's not there, you know? And I think they would clear those quickly as well. But even that case still now, or say they do swear and I'm gonna discipline them, I gotta wait 80 more days for them to give me my recommendation. I'm okay with that. And I've been, you know, we've discussed that and we're doing it. So it's a 90-day and then a 90-day, or you get the extensions, and as soon as you close it, it's another 90 days. I know it's confusing, but that's. So it's at least, it could at least be 180 days.
Alder Saban still has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, just so I understand, so currently, you've worked out an arrangement where there's the IA investigation for 90 days, and then after the IA investigation, you have 90 days additionally in the contract to make a decision, and you're currently waiting 80 days before you make your decision to get the CRB's report, right?
Yes, we've changed that with Attorney Merkin and Catherine and all of us involved. We've made sure that happens.
Do you have a response?
Yeah, I just want to respond. That applies to cases where they have sustained an allegation only. Okay.
Understood.
In cases where they have found no wrongdoing, they're closed immediately.
But they're also presented to the CRB as closed cases and what goes on, and they hear everything that we present.
But they've been closed, and I think it is unfair to everybody, to the citizens, the complainant, and the police, to reopen a closed case. The strong preference would be to address it up front, allow the CRB to review the case and to provide input before the chief makes a decision. And in that language, in that last page, I think they are already required to do that. I'm just trying to make that stronger throughout the other provisions in the ordinance. If they're able to close a case after they find no wrongdoing, what's the point of us even looking at it? The point of the CRB in reviewing IA's work is to provide oversight and accountability for the citizens and the complainants who make their complaints. And so if we disagree with IA's findings, which we probably won't do very often based on my experience thus far, we should have a platform to provide that information to the chief, and he should have it in front of him before he closes a case.
Understood.
Can I add something to that?
Please.
So we have discussed this too, because when we were going through this together, we discussed it. In section G on page 4, to review and hear appeals from any civilian complaint within 90 days of the completion of the internal affairs investigation by any police department acting within the city of New Haven pursuant to municipal police powers. So they can hear closed cases when the complainant comes forward. Now, we both agree that could be tough because it would just be tough, but there is a provision in there for that.
With due respect, I read that the complainant has to initiate the appeals process. It says to hear appeals from any civilian complainant. It doesn't mean that the board itself, as a group, can provide input. to the chief in cases where there's no finding of wrongdoing. So I understand that this appeals provision has not been used much, if at all. And I don't know really how procedurally it would work, but the way I read it is that the complainant is the one that initiates that process.
And the way that we're giving them the information out front and they're making contact with the person, that's all to open up that if the person has a problem with it, because they're notified immediately upon the closing with
Within 5 days in writing.
yeah, in writing and sometimes in person. So with 5 days of the closing, they would have plenty of time to go to the CRB and say, I don't like the outcome of this.
Right, but that's them, we're us.
But you're the civilian review board. That's
Right,
the
and I represent the
civilians.
board, right, but I represent our jurisdiction to review these complaints, and I'm trying to strengthen it.
You have any other questions, Alder Saban?
If I could ask one more question, Mr. Chair, I just want to understand, I understand what you're saying about the cases already having been closed, but I'm wondering from the chief's perspective, is it possible to reopen a case after it's been closed?
With the appeal thing that I just read.
It's only if the citizen
Is unhappy.
if the citizen appeals, but you could not reopen a case that's been closed based on something that the Civilian Review Board provides to you?
To be honest with you, we were talking about this. I don't know if I could. I would have to, that's another question for Wendella and the labor and the union.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Morrison.
I believe Elder Saban just asked my question because the bottom line to me, from as I'm hearing this, is if the chief made a decision, no, that nothing happened here, they gave it to the Civilian Review Board and they found, no, he didn't see X, Y, and Z, and this happened, why can't it just be open up? Like, here's new evidence to show X, Y, and Z. Now you need to relook at that. So I'm just trying, and you just answered it, I believe you have to go back to the labor.
And find out. I'd be open to those conversations, but we haven't had any of those conversations either. They've never brought any of these to my attention. So we both, in cooperation with Beth, with Attorney Mercantile, we talked about this because it's like, it hasn't happened. How does it happen, right? So say with the Board of Police Commissioners, we'll argue some points and we'll talk about points and we'll say, and they'll even come up with, well, can we make this policy harder, more stiff so that this is a violation policy? Yes, absolutely. The Board of Police Commissioners make the policy. And the same thing with CRB. I do remember a recommendation where we looked at it and said, oh, we need to stiffen this policy, right? So we do work together like that. But as for reopening the case, I just think that's a crazy door, because what if they want to reopen a case from 3 years ago?
So I guess in just listening to the conversation and listening to the way that you guys have been doing it, it's that 5-day period that the person is notified that this complaint, there's no issue here. The CRB has this information and they're in contact with the person. Mm-hmm. Why can't the CRB inform them, you have the right to appeal this within that 5 days? Because that's what it sounds like you're saying, that they have a 5-day period to appeal.
No, they have 90 days.
That 90. So why wouldn't the CRB just be able to tell the person that you need to go back and appeal? I mean, to me, it sounds simple. Maybe it's not simple. Maybe it's a whole lot more than that. But because the CRB, I look at you guys as advocates, for the community. And if there was an issue that happened with a community resident and the chief found that there was no issue here, but as the advocates, you found something else, you're here to encourage the people to speak on their behalf, to enact their rights, and their rights being to ask for an appeal.
What if the complainant lost interest? What if it was 6 months later or 9 months later and the complainant lost interest? I'm done. the CRB still, in my opinion, has an obligation to address this. And I think that the vehicle here, where we're allowed input at the front end, is the way for the group of CRB members to address a disagreement that they may have with internal affairs.
I hear exactly what you're saying, but it's not up to the CRB. It's up to the person. If I feel like I was, because believe me, I've had police officers cuss me out, right? But then as time goes on, I don't want to be bothered with it anymore, right? Who are you to tell me, yeah, I need to continue? Because I want to move on with my life. So if there's a provision that allows the person that has been affected to move forward, I believe that provision is what you want. You don't want to put anything in place to say that an entity can force me to continue with this issue. That's just how I'm hearing this. And so that's why I asked the question, but it sounds like we have that provision in place, but it's up to the individual. Because some people, anything involving the police in my mind is traumatizing. That they've been traumatized. Sometimes you want to go to therapy, work that out with your therapist, and be done with it. You don't want to continue up this road. So I'm not quite understanding why you guys are pushing to be able to be an entity to force the situation. That's almost like making me go back to court, and I don't want to go back to court. So that's where I am. So I have a question. I kind of answered it for myself. I had to process it, but that's where I am. So I think I'm done, but it sounds like she has a statement. So to the chair, she wants to say
Certainly.
something to me.
Would it be okay?
Certainly.
Okay. So, I actually hear everything you're saying. I've actually been in the same situation, even though I'm chair of the CRB. I was in a situation where I made a complaint. So putting myself in both shoes. There have been situations where complaints have been pending for years, 1 year, 2 years, maybe longer. When that happens, the person could be incarcerated. The person could be deceased. The person could be unavailable. We don't have contact information. There are a lot of factors that go along with it. So I do understand what you're saying, and that makes total sense. But there are other situations where that person can't speak because they moved out of state. They don't have a working number. We don't know how to locate them. So there are a lot of factors that go along with that. So unfortunately, it's not always, that one way, if that makes sense.
I just want one more statement. I work for the Department of Children and Families. And when families are investigated for whatever reason, and you get the form, on the bottom of the form, it tells you, if you feel like you have been investigated wrongly or you want a fair hearing, call this number or email this place. And I don't know if the letters that you guys send give the person the information about where they can go. And so I hear what you're saying, but the police let them know in 5 days where they can go, and they have, it sounds like 90 days to do it, to go forward. So it falls back on the person, because I often look at people don't want to continue to be traumatized. And, I often think about my job and sometimes when people are being forced, children that are being forced to do different things. So I kind of look at this as the same thing. If I have as the person that was violated, I am giving a document that is giving me 90 days to come back and say, I don't agree with what you're saying. I think that's where the buck should stop. I don't think an entity should be able to say, you know what? Nah, this isn't right. We're going forward with this. You know what I mean? So that's all I have.
On our forms, we do have appeal, a phone number, and email for the CRB.
Even bringing them to you, not even just the the police, right? Because that's what it would be, to go further, to go to them to help with that process. Is that what that form is saying?
Yeah, when, on the closing of the form, this is the closing form, right? So when you get your form, it says, if you have any questions, call the internal affairs division. In addition, you may also contact the civilian review board, as a phone number and an email. But we could add, if you have any questions, we could add to appeal to that letter.
And that's huge. That one letter, that's huge to appeal. So, okay. So I just wanted to get more of a understanding of why would that be so important? Because my whole thing is we want to give people the ability to go forward if they want to go forward. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Certainly, thank you. Alder Marchand?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this will be brief. And it's less geared towards the red and blue text and more towards the black text. But it's the section we're on. I just want to know, I don't recall that we have a definition section to this portion of the ordinance, do we? We don't. Okay. So the term civilian, which is a word that we know what it means generally in life, it's not defined in the ordinance anywhere, is it?
Not to my knowledge, sir.
Okay. And so who can file a complaint? For example, could it be a visitor to the city of New Haven?
Yes.
Sure. Okay. It could be a resident, obviously.
And people could file complaints on behalf of people,
Okay.
which happens at times.
All right. So
And we're mandated not only by our policies and procedures, but by state law. Since the police accountability bill says, doesn't matter who puts in the complaint, say you were wrong, but she saw it and put it in, we have to investigate.
And it can be filed anonymously as well.
Yeah.
Certain people just don't want their names on a public record, and they file anonymously, which would respond a little bit to Ms. Morrison's concerns in that if an anonymous complaint was filed, and we as a board felt that it was meritorious, and yet IA believed that there was no wrongdoing, it's a good example of how, as a board, we would want to act and provide input in that circumstance. I do think that as an entity, we do have some obligations to oversee the work product that they are generating.
I understand your
regardless.
argument. It's, you're kind of banging that other drum, but which is what I'm not asking about. But I understand your point. I'm just trying to understand like who can file a complaint. Presumably it couldn't be another uniformed officer of the police department.
Sure, anonymously if they want.
If they want to do it anonymously. Even though
We
they're
have
not
officers
civilian.
complain about other officers. That may turn into what we call an I case, not a
Right.
civilian review.
Probably
It would
would
be
be
me
under
opening
this.
the case. So that's the difference of, like, they're looking at all the civilian open cases. I, at times, open cases because I see, potential misconduct. They don't look at the I cases. And then there's other times where there's both I and C, so they look at them too.
So anyone who's not a uniformed member of the police force, who resides here, who visits here, who happens to be here and have an interaction with the police officers that gave rise to a complaint, regardless of resident status or citizenship or anything else. You could be visiting from
Spain.
Spain and it's still, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Alder Marchand. Any other questions on this topic before we? Okay, let me go to Alder Rodriguez. She hasn't had the floor yet, and then we'll go to Alder Saban.
Thank you. Looking at the police officer and their job description, their contract, their guidelines and procedures that they have to abide by, and looking at your daily operations, how would this impact you from serving the citizens in a daily manner if we were to look at having to wait for a period of time before you can then take action on a matter that you see needs to be taken action immediately? That's my first question. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you for the question. A lot of the stuff we do agree on, like, if we could figure out a time period, if they have an investigator that's up and running, so, and we agree to give them the materials at the beginning of the investigation, that may work out, you know what I mean? There's a lot of things we've discussed. And I'm just concerned about officers having these cases over their head. Now, the chair was correct. We do have some cases that are year out or whatever, but some of those are related to, somebody had done social media stuff and we're doing subpoenas, and some of them we haven't closed yet, but we may never find out who did it, right? So there are some cases that are open for a long time, but they're not basic cases that we have body camera for and everything else. And there are some within a year, major cases that, because I didn't have the staffing to do. And that's why I'm saying I gotta catch up and get to this process so it's smoother and it works. As for, I mean, I'm concerned about officer health and wellness, where we're gonna keep this open for another 45 days, another 90 days. And then we're gonna say, the CRB doesn't like our decision, so we're gonna reopen this case, and you're back on the stool about whatever, you know? I think there is an effect to that, you know? I don't know what it is, but I also do wanna work with the CRB, as we always have, so.
Thank you, Chief.
Sure.
Through the chair, I can respect what my colleague has talked about when we talk about definitions. What does review mean? We have the police commissioners, so everyone plays an important role. This is nice, but it would have been nice to see the roles and how everybody is collaborating together in reference to the Civilian Review Board, because the police commissioner has a role to play in the Civilian Review Board. My question to you is, why do we have to have something stipulated as serious as this, where the daily operations of the police department can be impacted? And why would a police officer have to be put in a situation where they might miss days of work, impacting the city's daily operations because of what has been said, even though there are times where it's merited, and I'm sure that our police department can make important decisions. My question is, why can not the Civilian Review Board, upon their receiving the initial complaint, act and ask or correspond, provide written correspondence so as to certain things can be looked at by the chief of police as he is? Because written correspondence can be provided by just about anyone. Anyone can pick up and make a report to the police department directly. So the Civilian Review Board is very significant in its role, but timely. But review means that, review. It doesn't mean to create a process where then the police department is not able to act immediately as it should be able to do so in a city like ours. My question is, we also look at items in black, bold, J, L, M, and N, all talk about evaluation, reports, providing information.
What page now?
If you look at item on page 4 of the document, and it says to prepare an annual report to the office of the mayor and the board of alders indicating, and it goes on to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it goes on to I. If we look at L, to recommend revisions to policies. While you're doing all this work together, you're building and you're improving the Civilian Review Board. It's giving the very document, the very work that we initially did is giving you the ability to provide the input necessary to really strengthen the civilian reboard and its place in the work that we must do to protect our civilians, to develop policies and procedures for the filing and processing of civilian complaints. And it goes on, the last one is to develop a memorandum of understanding with some of our partners like Yale University, Police Department, and so forth. So there is an opportunity here. And as I understand, the chief and you both have been in dialogue. So why can't we work through this venue instead of having to add such serious language to the existing ordinance?
Well, I guess I would just respond by saying I don't know that it's such serious language. Like I had indicated before on page 6, there already is existing language which requires the chief just to have in front of him both recommendations before he makes a decision. So that's already law by our existing ordinance. We're trying to clarify it, we're trying to strengthen it, we're trying to make it kind of easier to comply with. We're not asking that the chief reopen a case or close a case and reopen it. We're asking the chief to do what's said here, that he cannot make a decision regarding the disposition of a civilian complaint until he's reviewed the findings of both the CRB and IA. Okay, and so the way things are set up right now, if a report that is generated by IA says unfounded, we are not in a position where we've had time to provide our input. And so if he doesn't have those 2 reports in front of him, as he must, my goal was to just strengthen that language in other parts of the ordinance so we can really execute on what I believe we're already authorized to have him do. So it's simply allowing him, he can look at our recommendations and say, no, I reject those. These seem silly to me. I favor IA's recommendations. I concur with what they say. But until we have a voice and a role in that process, the way that subsection E requires, I don't think we're fulfilling our role. So I would just respectfully disagree and say I don't think that these are such serious changes. I think they are changes that are building upon existing language and making the process clearer.
And I do respect that, but we have to look at the content of the entire ordinance and its in its place in reference to what this language means. Thank you, Attorney. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chair.
Certainly, thank you, Alder Rodriguez. We left off at what page? Kind of jumped ahead a little bit, but that's fine. We're on.
I can,
Are there any other? Oh, I'm sorry, Alder Saban. I forgot.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a quick question. So you said that that any civilian can submit a complaint on behalf of someone else. Is it possible for someone to appeal a decision on behalf of someone else?
my experience with that appeal provision is 0. Since I've been at this job, I've never seen an appeal. So I can't speculate as to why that is the case, and I think that if we're going to really build upon the appeal process, we should maybe spend some time, the chief and I, discussing about how that might work, but I don't know the answer to your question. I don't know if you, for example, if you're a witness, say that you were a witness to an event that you found in your mind the police to be doing something wrong. You weren't the victim, but you were a witness and you filed a complaint. I don't know if you, I guess technically you're the complainant, I guess you can appeal, but.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to get at is if somebody who is affected by some alleged misconduct files a complaint and then there's a decision, if someone else is able to appeal that complaint, appeal that decision, not the person who submitted the initial complaint, but somebody else. If that was allowed under current law, then the Civilian Review Board could potentially appeal on behalf of the resident who submitted the initial complaint, and that would sort of address what is being asked for right now. I don't know if that, again, that's sort of why I'm asking if that's possible. I don't know if it is. It may not.
But if you're talking about, like Ms. Rodriguez is saying, undue delay, reopening, extending, things like that, to me, if you allow 45 days up front, there's closure. Okay, whereas if you allow for an appeal, that could last, in the officer's mind, the case is closed, he's exonerated, but yet then there's an appeal process, and we as a board have to kind of go through this, and then there's something in that provision that kind of describes or sets up how you file an appeal or how it's brought to the attention of the police department, but I would submit that if if the review is on the front end, it's a better process for all of us.
Fair enough. I just want to make sure I understand the existing procedures to see how we're attempting to change them. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Sabin. Alder Morrison.
And so as I'm looking, and I hope I'm not asking the same thing that Alder Sabin just asked, but in just looking at your chart, and as it says, number 1, the CRB is provided with a copy of the complaint within 5 days. And then after that, the IA investigation starts. And then number 3, that's when the IA prepares the report with its findings and notifies the chief and the CRB. Why can't the CRB follow the same process? And if this notification goes to the chief, number 3, why wouldn't the CRB give their information at number 3? And then now,
Because they don't get the case until we have investigated it.
We're not provided access.
okay, they
We
can't
give
get
them
it.
the information, they're just not investigating.
Okay,
Now, one of the models we both discussed, which is gonna be a huge labor issue with the union and labor, would be that they start at the same time, but with an investigator and an attorney, not the whole board. Like going out investigating, knocking on doors. We've discussed it, but I don't think we're there yet.
okay. So this sounds like it's more of the labor issue and the rules and regulations that go around there. Because if everybody just was able to be like, okay, everybody gets all the information up front, then IA gives you a report, CRB gives you a report.
But the problem would be who interviews who, when, and
Right.
all this stuff. And
So-
in our minds, it's kind of gets complicated there. I know they did it in Hartford for a while. We're just not there yet. And I have to have long discussions with the union and labor before I do that. I'm not fully against it either, but we need to figure out how we do that.
Okay. Oh, no, I was just asking because it seems like there's a funnel system there, but the barriers to that funnel system is the union stuff that prohibits certain information being able to be given to the CRB in order to be a part of the case when you're looking at both elements. So, okay.
And that's our predicament, is that we don't have jurisdiction over the case, and we don't have access to the file until it's closed.
Okay.
Okay? Once it's closed and it's given to the chief, if there's a finding of no wrongdoing, we haven't done anything yet. And so he closes the case, and that's our predicament, that's our dilemma. We're really unable to do our oversight job.
But you could make recommendations, but I haven't seen it.
So, getting back to what I was saying.
Just very quickly, Alder Morrison, I just want to remind our guests that if I can hear you talking, the recorder can pick you up also.
Mhm.
And so we're going to ask those in chambers to refrain from talking inside of chambers if you need a conversation. if you would just step outside because everything gets picked up on our recorder. Back to you.
Okay. So the issue here is it has to go through labor. I mean, we want the oversight, we want the CRB to be able to look at the case, but if you know, I have rights. You know, if I'm a police officer, I have rights, and I have a union that protects me. And and that's why I pay my dues, so I can have that protection. And so if my labor is, you know, in doing all this stuff as far as my union is concerned, and saying that we cannot just give this information out to civilians, basically. I mean, as far as what we're doing here, I don't think that we have that. I mean, we gotta look at the law, right? And just like our attorney, who's sitting with us tonight, she said that anything to do with labor, it has to go back to the labor, person. And then at the same time, as you all talked about, this investigator, that person is not in place yet, right?
The contract is pending. Our board has voted to hire a certain individual, and from what I understand, the contract is pending.
Right. So once we get that person in place, and a real conversation can happen, but until we have that person in place, as noted by the chief, it doesn't look like a person's private information can be given to a whole board of people. And so that's what predicament it sounds like we're in.
So
we just don't have the person in place to be able to say, this one person is going to do the investigation, who's going to look at all this information. Right. And so, okay, it helped me because I'm looking at this, I'm like, this is real simple, but it's not real simple because.
No, I tried to make it simple just as a opening to the more complicated conversation I'm having, so apologies. So one of the provisions that I've proposed here concerns access to the police reports, basically the IA file within that first 90-day period. The chief and I discussed that if perhaps it's limited to the attorney and its investigator, okay, that might be a middle ground that is more workable. In other words, even though the CRB, the board members cannot have access to that file or take a look at that file until the IA report has been prepared and generated, perhaps a good middle ground would be for the attorney or the investigator to get a head start and take a look at the IA file, the police reports, the body cam footage. Sometimes a review of those cases takes 10 minutes, sometimes it takes 3 hours. Some of them are complicated. Some of them have multiple officers with body cams from different angles, and you have to go on evidence.com and pop it up on the computer and watch for 2 hours to kind of see what's relevant and what's important. Maybe only 10 minutes is relevant, but it takes that 3 hours or 2 hours to go through it. So my proposal to the chief is that if we can get a head start and take a look at IA's materials, the police reports, etc., the attorney and the investigator, that might be a good compromise. That way, when the case is closed, and then the board members have access, we can have a heads up. We can say, look, this seems like it's not a serious matter. Maybe it's frivolous, or we may conversely say, no, this really warrants some attention. There may be some conduct here that the board might take a look at. So the proposal here is to give full access within 90 days, but such materials can be available to the CRB board members after the completion of the IA report. So that was a compromise that I was hoping would be approved, because again, that would allow us to get a head start and take a look at their file soon after the complaint files.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I have a question for Attorney Merkin. Can you give me the citation of that? Because I don't see that language.
When you say citation.
I see it's a C. Look,
801.
Thank you.
Is yours on color, maybe, Catherine? That's maybe why you're.
This is on a different.
Yes,
the
pages, I'm just trying to catch up to
Oh.
what you're talking about, then we'll go back to you otherwise. You all set, Attorney Lamar?
Yes,
You
sir.
found it?
Thank you.
Okay.
So, no, the only thing that I wanted to say is, I know that, you know, we are working, we're a lot closer today than we were last year in getting this investigated. But we're still not there. And until we have an actual person in that role, be it investigator, attorney, or whomever.
I'm the attorney.
Yeah, well, you're the attorney, but the investigator, it sounds like you're really looking at this investigator person. Until we have that investigator in place, then, I mean, the conversation to me right now is kind of mute because we don't have that person, right? As far as we can say, well, we have Alder Rodriguez, she is our person, you know what I mean? So, okay.
Maybe Attorney Lamar can speak to the status of that contract. I think it's very close in time to be signed.
I really would like to stay away
Yeah.
from the collective bargaining.
Right, I'm not trying to
Saying
get
the
involved.
contract.
That's good.
Mm.
We don't have to, Walter. I only brought that one thing up to say that that person is not in place right now. And city government is slow. And just because you can see it right there, it could be another, I'm not saying it will, but it could take more time. And so we can't act on something on the hope of, right? Once we have the person, then it makes it a little more
For what
concrete.
it's worth, I am willing until she starts to take on that role because this proposed language allows for either the attorney or the investigator. And so it would be my plan to take on that role immediately.
But again, that's one of the issues that the union and labor have. I agree, but they have an issue.
Yeah, that's, I don't want to go.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
so that's what
I'm
I was
all set.
referring to. I don't want to cross that line. We don't have, and we didn't ask her to come this evening because we're not going to deal with that today. Collective bargaining, we're just not going to get into the weeds of that. Amen. Okay, if you would continue, are we set?
Oh, yeah, I'm all set. Thank you.
Attorney?
I think I have hit on the most important provisions. I think that you all received this summary and, the provisions that are discussed here, the redacting of incoming complaints, that has been agreed to by the chief of police and Attorney Lamar. So, that is in paragraph 2-801B, where we are asking that the copies be unredacted. Previously, their practice was to redact the identifying contact information of complainants. We found that to be problematic because we would like to send a reach out letter to complainants when they file a complaint to introduce ourselves, our role, to answer any questions, etc. I'm happy to report that not only do we reach an agreement with the department about that, we also, as a group, wrote and approved a letter that should be going out maybe this week or next, both in English and Spanish, to complainants that kind of walks them through the process and kind of explains what the CRB's role is. So that has been addressed. We're pretty proud of that accomplishment. Earlier access to NHPD materials. I think we've already hit that. It was our hope to approve of this language, which would allow the attorney or the investigator to take a look within that first 90 days so we can start doing our job. That would give us, if the 45 days, if this top provision is ultimately approved, it really would allow us to meet that 5-day or even if it's a 30-day deadline, because we can get a head start. We can look at the file when the IA report is completed and we are given a copy. The attorney or the investigator can already have given a look to that case and say, look, I think this might be one of those cases, unusual cases, where we may disagree with IA's findings. Okay, we'll already have done our homework or started. So I think early access is kind of connected to this idea that we have the ability to review those files and provide input in the way that this last paragraph requires. So again, oops. I keep pointing to this language here. I do think that we have every right to provide input to the chief before he closes a case. I think if we had earlier access within the first 90 days to materials, we really would be able to get that done. And this way, when he sits and reviews the IA report, he can look at our recommendations. He can decide, do we have some good points? Do we not? That's up to the chief. Okay, he can say, no, I really think IA did a very thorough job. I concur with theirs. I'm not going to give much weight to the CRB, but at least we'll have participated in that process the way that paragraph E, I think, requires. So those are really our kind of the main points that, again, we are trying to strengthen our role. We are trying to have our voices heard primarily in those cases where IA has found no wrongdoing. And we think that these provisions will allow us to do a better job in meeting our obligation in that regard.
I before we go to the chief, I appreciate, thank you for your testimony. You must be an attorney. Because that was a summation, for sure. Thank you
Well,
for
I have
your
a
work.
chart for summation too, which I didn't pass out.
Thank you. I just want to push back just a little bit, with all due respect, because I heard it said several times about the rights of the Civilian Review Board. The rights of the Civilian Review Board is what we decide. They are not what the Civilian Review Board decides, because we're the body that creates the ordinance, and we decide as the elected officials what's best for this board. We worked ardently to create this ordinance over many years, and we had promised that we would review it and listen to. Are you an attorney that's with?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is he with you?
No, he's,
Oh, you're the
I just
lady.
wanted to make a comment when it's my turn.
Okay. We'll call you in. You can, sir. You're with the city?
Yeah.
Yes. I see you now. Okay. You can have a seat here, sir, and then we'll ask you to introduce yourself in just a moment. I lost my place, but I think what I was saying was significant. And so, yeah. But I did want to go back to the redacting. And I was looking for it, and you gave a section, but I missed it. So I wanted to read that quickly.
2801D.
Okay. B is in bird?
Oh, sorry, B.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. I will read this through and we'll ask if you would give us your name and address for the record.
Sure.
And then you'll have the floor.
Yep, thank you. Curtis Stubbs. I'm a staff attorney with the Office of Labor Relations at the City of New Haven. And my address is 232 Farmington Avenue, F6, Hartford, Connecticut, 06105.
Okay, you have something you want to add?
Yes, I did.
Sure.
So when this committee last considered a proposal from the same folks about the Civilian Review Board, Director Office of Labor Relations Director Batty provided a letter listing some of our concerns about the proposal. The new language the new language, essentially we still have the same concerns. The only section that we have no concerns about would be section 2-798 A and B. A and B. Yeah, 2798 A and B, which is about trying to sort out the issues with the forum. So we have no issues with that. Otherwise, we get with the rest of it.
Section
798 A and B.
Under membership?
Just the different rules.
Right, no objection to those changes.
Who resides in each? Okay.
Seems that there's a lot of concern about all the rest of it.
Right,
Yes.
yeah, item A has hardly any change, and then B.
Yeah, so this would resolve some problems, and that it seemed, we don't have a problem with it.
And so F and G is what?
278 A and B.
Yep, but F and G,
No, we're,
you're not, okay.
that's all I had, Ron.
I see, I understand that, okay,
Okay,
thank
thanks a
you,
lot.
thank you. Chief Jacobson.
No, I just appreciate Attorney Merkin in the chair. We are working towards a better solution. We were just here a couple months ago and we talked about getting things in order, and they're hiring an investigator. I'm catching up on my work. But it's apparent that there is an appeal process in here, and the Civilian Review Board is here for the civilians, for the people that put in the complaints. So if the person's okay with what we ended up with, but we will hopefully, as we progress forward and an investigator comes in, I don't have an issue with not suspending that time because the investigator has the information and they can talk to the Civilian Review Board earlier. You know, that's the whole theory of this, to work at some point. But they're for the civilian. So if the civilian doesn't have a problem with the findings of the internal affairs, the CRB is going to want to reopen it or have a problem with it. They can also affect my decisions by recommending policy and everything else that Alder Rodriguez mentioned. So, I also don't have a problem with the 801B because we're doing that already, the unredacted stuff. We do agree to that.
Can I just ask before I give it to Alder Marchand, because I kind of have the floor, sort of. Why was it redacted in the beginning? What was the?
When I became chief, it was already redacted. So we discussed it several times and we changed it.
And the
reason was
for
about,
changing it?
well, the reason why I was told why it was redacted, because we didn't want the CRB to, until we're done investigating, have any of the information. But I disagree with that, where they agreed to not investigate, but simply correspond with the person, like, I believe they're gonna do a letter.
And the only thing that's redacted is the complainant's name?
It was the name and information, now it's unredacted.
What information?
Like, contact.
Oh, just, okay, so their name and address.
So the other provision that says any proportion redacted must be approved by the chief. Now, say it's a domestic violence case and there's a child's name in there, we will redact that in accordance with FOI and stuff like that. And we all agree to that.
Right.
Okay. And I'm just wondering if labor agrees with that also, but possibly not. Okay, I'm going to turn to Alder Rodriguez and then Alder Marchand.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm hearing, the retracting of complaints and that is a concern. But here's my question. The civilian, if the civilian comes forward and wants to pursue this, that's understandable. We're respecting their rights. But if I am the individual who put in the complaint and I've received a letter, you've done your investigation, and the case is closed, I'm looking more for, I'm gonna say HIPAA rights of the individual. And I'm sitting here listening to everybody. If I received a letter and I felt comfortable, although I put forth the complaint, and I feel comfortable with it being closed, what I'm hearing is that the CRB would then want to take it back up and proceed on their own accord to reinvestigate. But I just want to understand, let me finish. So I said, I'm okay, let's leave it alone, let's keep moving. I want to get past this incident. Is the CRB, this is how I'm hearing it, and correct me if I'm wrong, you are not happy with the decision of it being closed, but I'm the civilian that says I want it done. Is it that you then would say, let me, in their defense, pick it up? And then to add to this, is it your responsibility in that letter that you say to them, the Civilian Review Board may want to reach out to you? I'm just asking for, as I know in the hospital, HIPAA regulations. I don't want anyone contacting me unless it's stated in a letter. And it should be my decision if I want to reach out and pursue it a second step. I'm just thinking of privacy and rights of me as a person of items being moved forward without my knowledge. Can I then turn around and file a complaint that I have the CRB reaching out to me and file a complaint against the police department because now you're moving my information forward? Although I know I'm confusing everybody, but I'm just thinking, in the hospital, there is a policy, you have a HIPAA policy. And so I'm just concerned, there's so many people involved in my bad moment, and I want it to be done. I'm sorry if I'm making it confusing, but I'm just thinking in a different way. I want to be done with it. Confidentiality, my confidentiality.
And analogous, but it's not HIPAA, it's.
Thank you. My confidential, thank you. Thank you, I appreciate that. My confidentiality, I want it just, if I no longer want to pursue this, what I kept hearing is, CRB would like to continue it and hear it again.
Real quick, can I just go to the bathroom?
That's off the record, Chief. Excuse you. Did you have a response for Alder Rodriguez?
I do. I don't, you want me to wait until the chief returns or?
No,
Oh,
we have Assistant Chief here.
My response would be that under our proposal, under our model, by the time you get that letter from the chief, we have already given our input and it's over. So under our model, he gets the IA report, he gets our input, he can accept our input, reject our input. He can still close the case, but he's reviewed our feedback before he makes that decision. So if you get that letter, it's over. Unless you want to take some sort of appeal. I guess that's a separate question.
So then what I'm looking, what I'd like to see is that before it's moved over to the CRB, I'm the complainant, I'd like to be informed that someone else is going to be reviewing it.
Mr. Chair, through you. Number one, it's not applicable in
I
this
get it.
situation. Number two, as similar with when you file an action in a court, there's no, you don't have confidentiality. It's really not, it's not an available matter. It's, in fact, there's, under FOIA, there would be no, there's no exemption under FOIA for disclosure with the exception of things like, names of minor children, if there's an action that, unless it fits one of the 28 exemptions under FOIA, there really just isn't an exemption for that. So it's, once you make a decision to file a complaint, it is available to the public.
Unless you do it anonymous.
I was gonna say, which is why some people take that step and make that choice, that's right.
Not available. I can still do it. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, thank you.
Okay, Alder Rodriguez, and then I'm sorry. Actually, I was supposed to go to Alder Marchand and then Alder Rodriguez.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is like a very consequential matter, and it's got some complexity, and I'm grateful for everybody hanging in. I want to go to the quorum issue. The draft that we have in front of us removes the words, and with a quorum of 7, that's in section 2-798A. And then you add a B, which says, at any meeting of the Civilian Review Board, the quorum requirement for voting or for conducting any other type of business shall be met whenever there is a majority of the current board members present at that meeting. Tell me more about why you decided to make that change. Was it difficult to get a quorum? Like, what were the operational issues that arose that made that recommended change advice?
Yeah, 2 reasons. From what I understand, that requirement is a citywide, according to Attorney Lamar, that governs every board and commission throughout the city. So we were just kind of getting in line with other boards and commissions, the quorum rules and definitions with other boards and commissions in the city, so it lines up. And number 2, yes, we've been having a little trouble with membership and attendance. So it could be that if we stuck with the original language, which again is out of sync with the other boards and commissions in the city, we would have trouble doing any business. But this way, yeah, go ahead.
Madam Chair.
So,
Oh, this here.
thank you. So when the attorney refers to issues with membership, that meaning all of our seats are not filled. We have spoken with many people in the community who said they put in applications and the process hasn't continued. So I think that's our biggest challenge right now, is that we would like for the Board of Alders to assist us with that, with trying to fill those positions. And then we would have a lot more voice on the board. That would be super helpful. So that's kind of where that comes from.
Can you tell us, to the best of your recollection, how many seats are filled now?
10.
Of the 15?
We have there's discrepancy whether it's 15 or 17. Out of that 10, 9 are active members right now.
Okay. And what do you attribute the difficulty in filling the vacancies? Because you said that you've heard from residents who were interested, but somehow those recommendations were being filtered up through the layers that needed to be filtered through.
It could be that there's a lot going on, and maybe whoever is in charge of putting, getting those applications and interviewing and moving the process along, it could be busy. I mean, there's a lot of boards in the city. I don't know. But we have pursued that with.
You can finish your sentence.
So we have pursued that through email, through conversations with, we need support from the city so we can move forward.
Thank you. Attorney, you had something there?
My never humble opinion, I think it has to do with the recommendations coming from the community management teams. And some are more active and diligent than others.
Okay.
So.
Thank you for
as
that.
nice as I possibly can.
I appreciate that. I mean, I just recall the process when it was unfolding, that it took some energy and effort from many, in addition to those who were in the leadership of those CMTs, to make sure that it happened. And so, our process was written to have some complexity and some layers to it, which perhaps hasn't served the processes as well as it should. Thank you for that information. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Alder Marchand. Alder Rodriguez,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
you would grab that mic.
Thank you. Taking into account the employee's guide in the police department and acknowledging that it should have a discipline process. When you receive, for example, let's say that I was a police officer and a complaint came in, how would you then address me in the workplace?
I'm gonna let Chief Bartana explain that because she works
Thank
in
you.
internal affairs and runs internal affairs.
Good evening, Alder Rodriguez. So, for internal affairs, anytime there's a complaint made, a civilian complaint, the complaint is noted, given a case number, we call it a control number, and then a letter is sent to the complainant and an officer, the subject officer or the officers involved within 5-day period as well. A case number, like I said, is assigned, and they're issued a letter via email, noting the type of allegation as well, and then the name of the complainant. And that's according to our contract that we have to give them this information in the complaint letter, or the notification letter rather.
Do you take immediate action, like for example, I may not be able to work until the complaint is addressed, or?
There are certain allegations, for example, excessive force, or any use of force complaint that would be reviewed by the officer in charge of internal affairs and the investigators. And if there's any preliminary evidence that there was excessive force, the chief would be notified, and we have taken officers and put them on administrative duty or leave while we are investigating the full complaint.
And so taking into account the Civilian Review Board ordinance, does that complement or does it impact the way that you discipline? Thank you.
I don't think I think it impacts, I think it's a positive impact for the most part, where we have their recommendations and when we're able to have an open conversation with them, or during our meetings, or when they come in to review cases and talk about certain instances during the body camera footage, and they ask us, why did this officer take this type of action? And at that time, the investigator can either refute their complaint or explain further and expound on why the officer did what they did. So I think we have a chance to work together and explain why the officers do certain things.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Did I hear you correctly that the officer also gets the name of the complainant?
Yes,
And that's by contract?
yes. And when they come in, they actually,
Okay. Okay. Any other questions from committee members? Seeing none, did you have anything else you wanted to add? Yes, ma'am.
So just for the record, I just want to let everybody know we did move forward with hiring an investigator. We voted on that some time ago, and it's just been sitting with the city to move forward. I just, so everybody's aware.
You're saying the hold up is on our side, so just. Okay,
Not pointing fingers.
okay,
That contract will be in place within days.
okay, great. Thank you, Attorney Lamar. Anything else you wanted to add before we go to our public testimony? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you all for your presentation. We don't have anyone that has signed up for public testimony, so you don't have to walk back there, Ms. Miles, if there's no one that signed up. But I will ask if there's anyone from the public who wishes to testify on this item, if you would signal by a thumbs up. That's not a thumbs up, that's a hand up. There you go, okay. Come forward, please, Mr. Carter. Good to see you tonight. You give us your name and address for the record, please.
Hey everyone, John Carter, 106 Poplar Street. I am a member of the board to represent Fair District. So one of the things I want to discuss was part of the input that CRB can provide is increasing not just accountability, but how do we create standards in which we can lower some of the liabilities that the city may face when officers make not the best decision. Give an example. You may have an officer who just have a tough time keeping his hands to herself or her. And they may put their hands on the person, and that person may flop, or they may exaggerate what just took place, and that person actually get injured, right? Like, I could have avoided when the CRB has stepped in to, make recommendations so that moments like this could be avoidable, Another thing too about some of the things that we're requesting is the fact that, like, what does balance look like? Because when you look at the forces that exist, right, you have the union who has a tremendous amount of force, they have a tremendous amount of influence, they have a tremendous amount of ability to make changes or to not make changes. They're well established. Same thing with the police department, well established. But the entity of the community, right, like, how do we make them have something that's just as equal or just as impactful? Because for years, right, when we talk about presence, you don't even have to have a police officer in a patrol car, but just the presence of the car will stop people from speeding, right? Like, this is to let you know how people think in society. But who are the people for the community side that could resemble something similar? And the goal is, how do we create the CRB to be something like that, where its presence, its ability to advocate for the community, to be just that. No, we're not looking to just, well, hopefully we're not looking to just force people into doing things that they don't want. That's not what it's about. What it's about is just giving the option for them to have a say in the process, or to hopefully just to develop the wherewithal, the understanding that, hey, you actually can pursue this a little further than what has been given to you. You truly feel that is not the case. But I can tell from my experience on the board and the neighborhood I represent, some folks are very intimidated in the process. There's people who, at one point, when we didn't have the ability to confidently represent them or file a complaint, they wanted to complain, but when they learned that their name had to be on that report, they were like, I'd rather not. I'll just deal with this a different way. And that's a problem in regards to, hey, there's representation from the union, there's representation from the police department, but there's no one on that side for the community. And that's what this is really about, for at least for where I'm coming from. I can't speak for the whole, but for me, it's like those people are suffering. So that is it. And I do appreciate the time of everyone involved, and have a good night.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Committee?
I do have one question.
Yes.
Or
Alder Morrison.
more of a comment. You do understand that the police commission board is made up by the public. So any individual that lives in this city that wants to be on the police commission, they can sign up and be there. So that is the people's voice. We are blessed, or lucky, blessed, however you want to look at it, in this town, that we do have that. So that board is the ones who can fire people. So to me, if anything, knowing that there is an entity in place that can be the make or break of someone's job, that, as an individual, that says a lot to me. As far as the CRB is concerned, that's just another set of eyes to also help with that. But when you say that, we have all these forces, but the people don't have a force. The people have the commission, because those are the people from the community that are pushing either way. So I just wanted to state that, because we got to remember that we are blessed to have a police commission in place to be that voice outside of the CRB, which is an added tool.
Yes, indeed. And am I able to respond?
Certainly.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I do acknowledge that, right? I'm not saying that the CRB is the all and all, this is more so like, hey, in addition to what's going on with some of the community advocates or other commissions that do exist, there has still been an imbalance. Because if that's the case, why are people still fearful to make a complaint, right? There's still remnants of trauma on the police department. And it's not the fact that it's just because the entire department is an issue. No, it's not that at all. It's just the fact that there's misinformation. There's, I can't call it all, but the fact of the matter is that there's still people who are like, hey, how do I hold people accountable when I'm actually was done wrong? And there's moments of this, I've experienced it myself in regards to who's coming to me. And it's like, oh, we need to do more, because they're like, hey, some of these things that are in place, it seems political, or they find reasons of saying, I can't trust this entity. And not everything is perfect, right? There's not perfect commissions, they're not, but this is the way how it is. But all I know is that when a patrol car is not having the police inside of that car, it's very weird for a person to still speed. But when they see the presence of that car, whether it's empty or not, they're slowing down. And it's like, who is that in regards to why the community doesn't see that they have someone like that fighting for them when they're going through injustice or a process that they felt that was not fair for them.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Have a blessed night.
Is there anyone else from the public wishing to testify? Good evening. Give us your name and address for the record.
My name is Allison Heimer. My address is 54 C Street in New Haven. I am the administrator for the Civilian Review Board. Thank you all for your consideration this evening and for discussing this extremely important matter multiple times. I know that it takes a lot of energy to come out, and that these are very complicated and complex requests that are being made. It's not the easiest document to take in and understand. I want to talk a little bit about, as the administrator, what I'm seeing in terms of the challenges of the actual operation of the board that we're trying to address with these changes. The great news that I heard tonight was that the union representative from the city had no issue with section 2-798 parts A and B. That is incredibly important. If all we accomplished were changing those things, that would be an amazing accomplishment. Because what these would do is would allow our meetings to be conducted more reasonably. We wouldn't have an artificial number thrown into our ordinance, which is out of sync with all of the other boards and commissions in terms of quorum. And we'd be able to actually make sure that even though we only have 9 seated members and 1 appointed alder, we have a routine attendance of 7, which is just skating by. And if we were to lose one of those very active members, either due to not being reappointed, moving out of town, or something, some change in their lives personally, with the delays that we are seeing with the CMTs not appointing new individuals to represent them, it would be very hard for this board to do any business at all. So if the only thing that we're able to do is change that quorum requirement in the ordinance, that would be a huge success for the operation of the board and would make it a lot more viable as something that continues in the future. So I really hope that if you were to approve only certain changes this evening, that you would consider approving those 2 sections. The other sections in that, in here that are very, very important for the actual day-to-day operation of the board is to make it so that the CMTs can actually appoint anyone from the community. The way that the city operates right now, boards and commissions have to have people that are registered voters. They have to have people that are living in New Haven, in the district that they're coming from. There are members that sit on the board right now who have been appointed by CMTs and moved out of that CMT and therefore felt that they had to resign the position, even though they still live in New Haven. And that has made it very difficult for us to get people who are willing to be very, very passionate, who might, rent and move from Hill South to Hill North, and now they have to get a whole new CMT to appoint them, even though they moved a couple blocks away. And so because it's very based on policing district, and it's very limited, for those specific members, there has been a number of people who have resigned, who were really good, active, went to, the IA, reviewed the cases, had very smart opinions about what was going on, were passionate and were compassionate, which is incredibly important in this particular board, who had to step back just because of being renters in New Haven. And sometimes your lease doesn't get renewed and you have to find another place to be. And so it would be very important for us, if we could make it happen, to change some of the section 2-799 appointment language to include the word members of the community, so that it doesn't have to be truly perceived as living within the boundary of the policing district. The second thing that would be really helpful in that section is that the ordinance basically says that if a CMT has failed to recommend anyone within 90 days, that the mayor has the authority to submit names. And we would ask if, it is in all of your desiring, it's section G, 2-799 appointment section G. It says for initial implementation, each community member shall make a recommendation to the mayor within 90 days of passage. The mayor shall make appointments after that. If that, if the vacancy is not filled to the mayor within 90 days, that's section F, then the Board of Alders, in consultation with the mayor, will nominate an eligible resident to fill that vacancy. It would be great if you could work together to fill the seats that we currently have vacant. And right now, we do not have people who are representing the Hill South and Hill North areas. We don't have somebody from West Rock and Westville, and we don't have somebody from downtown and Worcester Square. And those are very, very active areas for the police. And I'm sure that there are very passionate people out there who would really like the chance and maybe just don't know that these vacancies exist. In addition, the Board of Alders is allowed to appoint up to 4 at-large members. And currently, you have 1 at-large that you've reappointed, that's Germano Kimbrough. And you have another that is waiting on reappointment and has not formally been reappointed, and that's John Pescatore. But you also have 2 vacant seats that you could choose to appoint, or the president of the board could choose to appoint. And you could all decide to approve. And it would be very helpful if we're not able to change any of this language, including the quorum requirement, if we could just make a plea to have some action on that. That's, from an administrative perspective, all I wanted to bring.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to testify on this item? Anyone else from the public would like to testify on this item? And for the, okay, and I'll ask, and Ms. Monson, were you able to get their names? Okay, great. So I should have had them written down for you.
Nina Fawcett, 420 Huntington Street. Sorry, I just got diagnosed with Bell's palsy.
Thank you for coming and testifying. Appreciate it.
I've been on the CRB since the beginning of the first big hire. And the only thing I would ask you if you're appointing people is to appoint people who don't have a cause in their head about settling an old score, because that is existent. And also people who want to work. I've seen, I would say 99% of the cases, all of the closed cases for the last, I don't know how many years, But I can't say that about a lot of people. And I have a standing 10 o'clock appointment every Friday to look at any close case there is. So before I even go to a meeting, I've seen those cases there. So anyone you want to put in this position, they should know the work to it. It's not just going to a meeting. And I have found, from my experience, that going to IA, looking at the body cam, reading the folders, talking to the inspectors, really has clarity to it. And I found it's important to see many cases, not just the one you think is a tough one, use of force, because the more you see, the better idea you have of the police experience. And it's not easy. I wouldn't want to be one. It's hard because you don't know what you're getting until you get there. So, and I think that when you have people, they should know that this is going to be not just a meeting a month. And they should be passionate about, in my head, is open-minded, and the idea is to make the police force a better force. And not to try to find fault everywhere, but to make recommendations to improve them, to make them stronger, to make them more compassionate, to make them do a better job. That's the way I approach it. And I would hope that when you find people to do this job, that's the kind of person you're looking for, who really wants to get in there, wants to work, wants to really understand the police experience. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from committee? Seeing none, thank you for your
Thank
testimony.
you. Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public wishing to testify on this item? You have something you'd like to add? Did you testify? Yes, you were, okay. You want to add something? Okay.
As a civilian.
Sure, come on down. We'll still need your name and address for the record once again.
Anne-Marie Rivera Barrios on 18-20 Winchester Street, New Haven. So, sitting at the table as a civilian, as a mom of my son, and I've been in a situation where I actually had to make a complaint, and the end result was that there was no footage in the when you walk into the police department, there was no footage. And so because of that, it was unfounded. So I think the Civilian Review Board plays an important role, because the end result was that there were a lot of issues because of that. And so they were able to make a lot of recommendations. Not all of them were pushed forward. Not all of them have been resolved to this day. But I think because of the important role of the Civilian Review Board, there have been a lot of important changes because of that. Do I think as a civilian there should have been action? Most definitely, because obviously a complaint would not have been made. Do I think it was fair? No, not in any way. And unfortunately, I have spoken with a lot of people in the community who have felt the same way. They felt that things were unfounded because there was no footage, there was no cameras, there were no witnesses. And I think we have to think about the community and how they're feeling right now. There's a lot going on. We need to give them a voice. Do I think that this is a lot? Yes, most definitely. But I think that change is important. I also think as an officer, I'm an educator, and as an educator, would I want anything hanging over my head? Absolutely not. If I am told that in 90 days that there's going to be disciplinary action and or not, and an end will be in sight, I would expect that. And I wouldn't want anybody to hold anything further than that over my head. But But to be at a place where we have a police department that is not completing investigations within 90 days, I mean, we have cases going back to 2021 and 2022 that are still open. That's pretty significant. And we really, really need to think about that and ask ourselves, why is this still occurring? For the year of 2024, we have had, as of May, we have had 6 cases closed. That's 6 entire cases for the year of 2024. If you look at the year prior, we had 16 closed. We had less people working for internal affairs last year than we did this year. So I just want you to think about those things and think about how we can move forward with making some changes in the best interest of the civilians, but also working with the police department, because I have totally made that change coming on board as being the chair. I've always said from day one, I reached out to the chief and said, can we have some sit downs? Can we have conversations? Because ultimately we need to be on the same page. We need to work together. And I think that's one of our biggest accomplishments. If we can say anything else, we have a great relationship where we can have a sit down and do those things. So I'm hoping that we can make changes in a way where if the investigation has to be closed within 90 days, me as a civilian, I want clarity, I want closure. I don't want to have to wait 2 and 3 years for that to be closed. And then I'm like, I want nothing to do with this. I'm over it, I don't even want to talk about it anymore. I don't want anybody to bring it up. But why are we doing that? Why are we making someone wait in the community that long to have closure? It's just not fair. So, and then the other thing too is, as an educator, if someone came to me 2 and 3 years later and said, I'm going to give you discipline now for something that happened 3 years prior, I would be very upset. I would call my union. I would be livid. So I don't think it's fair to the officers as well. I think on that note, they need closure within 90 days as well.
Questions from committee? Alder Morrison.
Just a question, when your situation was unfounded, did you appeal it?
No,
Okay.
because
But the information was on the bottom of the
I
letter.
actually never received the letter.
Okay. That's a problem.
Yes, and I've spoken with a lot of people in the community and who've said they've never received the letter. And we've had conversations with the police department about that. And there are no phone calls, there are no home visits, there's no door knocking. It's a certified letter and or a letter sent by mail. And if they receive it, they receive it. There's no verification end result to ensure they receive it.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that.
Any further questions from committee? You said there were 6 that were 6 cases that were closed in May. But I don't.
For the entire year, for January, February, March, April, May.
But I don't. How many complaints were there?
Numerous.
I don't have a scale.
Let's say 36. It's 48. Okay, 48. And those, out of the 6, I believe they were all from years prior. There were none, and I could be wrong, but I believe they were all from years prior. There were none for the current year.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else from the public wishing to testify on this matter? Anyone else from the public wishing to testify on this item? Anyone else from the public wishing to testify on this item? Alder Marchand.
Mr. Chair, I move that we close the public portion of this meeting.
Second.
Having been moved in second, is there any discussion on closing the public portion of this meeting? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? The public portion is now closed, and we will take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back into the break.
That's great.
I know.
You always get fooled, Alden. You fall on that. You always get fooled. Open to the public, but just the public. Yes. I've been doing this over 5 years now, so I forget that not everybody knows. So, yeah, they'll come back for discussion. They'll come back for discussion. Jan Carter, Helsenheimer, administrator, CRB, Nina Fawcett, I believe it's still sold on CRB, and Anne Marie Rivera, Barrios came out. Watched it.
All right, so then I just take them, all right, that's what I was saying.
Yeah, I can get it on YouTube.
It's not.
Yeah, I'll consider it to you as well. I've learned if you feel under this tab live, which it doesn't automatically bring you to that page, but that is for cities to see them all. And then the most recent ones are first.
Okay, so the tab live.
Yeah, I think it just says live, which is counter to it. It says it's no longer live and it's ended, but I will look at it.
Yeah, right. So this conversation, I want to get a copy of these.
Yes, no, and I was trying to remember when I received it, it was so long ago. Unfortunately, I'm not connected to that.
I know, that's why
But it doesn't mean anything because I've sent it out. I've got to check when I'm connected to the network.
it was me. I got asked to do the project.
Yeah.
Did we have lunch?
Not really. Señora.
Vamos a hacer lo que tenemos que hacer.
Vino para la casa.
Y no sé, pero vamos a ver.
Okay. Sounds good.
All the time.
No, that's the amendment. Okay.
Yeah. You see it still here?
Yeah, I don't know what that is. You know, it would help to actually have
Copy of the.
a copy of the existing ordinance.
Yes, yep.
Well, G, wasn't G the original establishment of it, which is already.
It's a moot point.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Good evening, colleagues. We'll call this legislation committee back into session. Our public portion has been closed and we are now in deliberations. Is there a motion? Alderman Marshall.
Mr. Chair, I move the item.
Second. Item has been moved and seconded. Discussion. Alderman Marshall.
Mr. Chair, I just would like to make a brief comment before proposing an amendment, which is that just confirmed with our staff that what was submitted originally to the Board of Alders was a brief order saying that the ordinance shall be amended, and it referenced an attached Schedule A, which was not attached. So anything that we would want, if we wanted to incorporate the amendments, the changes that were referenced by the Attorney American, for example, we would have to make them now because that actually isn't part of the item as it was originally submitted to us. So anything that we would want to change about the current, or anything we want to change about the ordinance, we would have to move those changes now because they haven't, that's not technically what's before us. So, and I see that our staff is nodding to confirm that. And just so that everybody here understands that what is technically before us is a version of the ordinance that doesn't have any changes. So I'm going to make an amendment to make some changes, if it's okay with colleagues. And so I'm going to move it in two different amendments. So I'm going to move an amendment to section 2-798. If you have a second, I'll describe it.
Second.
And so this is I'll describe it now, Mr. Chair. Section 2-798 is in regards to membership. And I'm going to refer colleagues to subsection A. And there's the words, "and with a quorum of 7, and then the numeral 7 in parentheses. My amendment would remove that from this subsection. So no more reference to a quorum in that subsection. My amendment would then create a new subsection immediately after A, let's call it B, and then the subsequent subsections would have to be lettered accordingly. Section B subsection B would say, at any meeting of the Civilian Review Board, the quorum requirement for voting or for conducting any other type of business shall be met whenever there is a majority of the current board members present at that meeting. So that is my amendment. I see that our staff has a question about it, but that's what I'm proposing. I want to see if colleagues have any questions about what I'm proposing.
I just have the recommendation of not adding B because that's already in a different ordinance. So it just makes things messy to have the same thing listed twice. So, you know, like in the future, if ever the Board of Alders would want to change it, it's better if they only had to change it in the one place rather than look through all the different ordinances for when it's listed. Because by removing the requirement of the 7,
that would be sufficient.
Back. Exactly.
So just as a question for our staff, the ordinance or the charter provision that you're referencing is an ordinance or charter provision that specifies what a quorum is for our boards and commissions.
It is Article 7 in Section 1, which is the general requirements concerning membership on appointed boards and commissions.
And what is, did you have it there? Can you say what is that?
Section H, quorum. A majority of the total voting membership of each such board and commission shall constitute a quorum for the transaction of all business unless otherwise required by the general statutes.
Okay. Thank you so much. So I will take back what I said before about creating a new subsection B. And so, and I thank our staff for that. So the only change that I am moving in this amendment is to strike the words "and with a quorum of 7" with the numeral 7 in parentheses from subsection A of section 2-798. That is my amendment. And I think we heard reasons from members who testified this evening about why the current language poses operational challenges to the CRB, and we don't want that to be the case. And I encourage colleagues to vote yes on this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay, the amendment passes. We are back to the item as amended. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, I move amendment to section 2-799.
Second?
Second.
Having been moved and seconded, discussion.
This amendment is about the section that talks about the appointment of people to the CRB. And my intention here is to remove the inclusion of the community management team as part of how people would be put forward to the mayor for consideration for appointment. And so I would call my colleagues' attention to subsection C underneath section 2-799. And I think we can just eliminate subsection C. It's not necessary. And then I would say subsection F. I think we could definitely get rid of right now it says if there is no recommendation to the mayor from the community management team within 90 days of a vacancy, the Board of Alders in consultation with the mayor will nominate an eligible representative to fill that vacancy. I think we can get rid of if there is all the way to vacancy, comma, we could get rid of those words and then say, in the cases of a vacancy, the Board of Alders in consultation with the mayor will nominate an eligible resident to fill that vacancy.
Okay, I'm going to ask Alder if you would just repeat.
Subsection F.
So you're skipping C?
Already said, C, I proposed to eliminate altogether.
Okay, that's what I missed.
In subsection F, there is a dependent clause. It's everything before the comma. I am striking everything before the comma and replacing it with in the cases of a vacancy, the Board of Alders, in consultation with the mayor, will nominate an eligible resident to fill that vacancy. So that there is a process to fill a vacancy, but it has nothing to do with this community management team. And I see there's a question from our staff.
Could I make the recommendation of striking C, F, and G? And it's for similar reasons. The ordinance already outlines, and it might be in the charter, but it outlines the process that if the mayor doesn't make an appointment, it goes to the Board of Alders, and if the Board of Alders doesn't make it, it goes back to the civilian review board to fill the vacancy.
You recommended getting rid of F altogether.
And G.
Now with G, but because the CRB has already been initially implemented, so you could say it's superfluous, but it will never be initially implemented again. So it's like you could keep it or leave it, and it doesn't really matter.
Cleans it up.
Yeah, it removes a little bit of the historicity of the document to do that. Which I like historicity.
But the history of ordinances is still there.
The history of ordinance is still there. Okay, so your opinion is that we don't need F at all because there's already language in our general code of ordinances saying how a vacancy should be filled. Okay. So, Mr. Chair, my attempt to be surgical is understandably being recommended to be a little bit broader. So my amendment now to section 2-799 is to eliminate subsections C, F, and G altogether. And my rationale for doing it is that I think with all the right motives, we constructed a process for the community putting forward possible nominees. We made it a complicated process, reliant on organizations with different levels of activity and diligence, and made it hard to fill all the open seats. And so we want this panel to be filled. We want people to serve. We want the board to function. I think it makes sense to remove the CMTs from any role in the putting forward potential nominees for this body. And I encourage colleagues to vote yes on this motion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Alder Saban.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a point of clarification for the proponent of the amendment. In section 279(8)(a), we've retained the language that says that one member from each of the police districts should be on the civilian review board, correct?
That is correct. My amendment doesn't touch that.
Great. So just to understand, the purpose of this amendment is so that the CMTs will no longer be appointing those members or nominating those members, but the mayor will still be required to identify a resident who lives in each of the different policing districts to nominate.
Correct.
To appoint.
Correct. I mean, if I may say more, Mr. Chair, I think you could make the argument that removing that requirement as well would also potentially make it easier. But I think having a broad geographical distribution of CRB members makes sense. It's just having it go through the organizational structure of the CMT is way too much. And I think it'll be simpler. But having each district represented, I think still makes sense. So my amendment doesn't do it.
If I could ask one additional question to the proponent. The proponents of the amendments that we've heard tonight asked, I think, for additional specific change, trying to address the issue that if somebody is nominated to represent one policing district and then moves into a different policing district, they might have to resign. And I'm wondering if we want to do anything to address that concern. For instance, the current language of the membership section, 279(8), where it says one member who resides in each of the policing districts. If somebody moved into a district that already had a representative, they would have to resign because then there would be 2 members from that policing district, whereas the ordinance says that there should only be 1. Maybe that we want to keep that to just try to maintain the geographic diversity.
Where are you reading from, Alder?
From section 2798, membership in section A. Well, I guess it should at minimum consist of members.
Right. If I may respond, Mr. Chair, this is not part of my amendment, but I think, it's worth considering. Instead of 1 member who resides in each of the police districts, you could say at least 1 member who resides in each of the police districts. I think, once someone's been appointed, they have certain rights to fill out the remainder of their appointment. It might mean then that the district the person moved from now has a vacancy, and that might mean that the mayor should probably find someone from that district. I don't know that this language would cancel out the remainder of someone's term just because they moved districts, given that they also have rights to fill out their terms.
So we're going backwards, right?
So far, my amendment hasn't changed from what I said. It's just, Overseeman is wondering about this other point. And at this point, I would not make that part of my amendment. If my colleague would like to move that as a separate amendment, I would invite him to do so.
Through you, Mr. Chair, my questions have been answered. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, well, just say it.
I guess I do just wonder whether, I'm not sure if this is the moment to do this or if there's some other moment at which we should add to the ordinance the idea that that people have the ability to serve out their terms if they are no longer located in their district. I'm going to retract that comment and.
Well, I think if
I want to make that moment.
If you want to make that amendment after we vote on
Yes,
this,
thank you.
then we can certainly entertain that.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment that Alder Marchand has presented? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay, the amendment passes. We're back to the item as amended. Is there any further discussion? We'll take a moment. Okay, Alder Morrison.
Just discussion.
Yeah.
Oh, just discussion. Just going back to what Alder Saban, what he was alluding to or basically said, and just listening to the testimony, we do have to take into consideration that when you rent, sometimes you have to move. And if we aren't very clear in our ordinance that says that just because today I live in Dixville, but now I live in Fairhaven, if we're not clear to say, basically, you can finish out your term, then people automatically start thinking, okay, I gotta leave because they already have someone in Fairhaven. So I feel very strongly that we have to add some language here that really is clear that if a person, moves into another district, that they do have the right to continue to finish out their term. So I guess I am making a motion. Well, I just want to have some discussion first.
We're having discussion, and I think that's a good point. But remember, I would call colleagues to remember that they are representing the police district. And so if they're no longer living in that police district and they move into another police district, then you're actually increasing the representation of another district. So it will be the same as if you're an Alder and you move, you've got to resign. If you're a co-chair and you move, I know these are elected positions and I'm stretching it, then you have to resign. So the way I see this is they're representing a district. It's not open to whoever in the area. Look, it's my opinion, we're welcome to an opinion, right?
And I definitely understand what you're saying, but if I'm in a position and because my landlord failed to do what they had to do because Section 8 told them to do, and now I got kicked out of my home and I'm doing a hell of a fine job on this board, I don't feel like I should be penalized because my landlord failed to do what he or she was supposed to do. I'm just talking about a person finishing out their term. And at the same time, the mayor does have a responsibility to find another person that lives in the district that I left. But I shouldn't be penalized as someone that wants to serve because I had to move. Because from the testimony we got here, that has happened. And they've lost very good people. And, you know, it's hard to change. You know, you're all 6 months. It's hard to train a new person to get that momentum. So I just feel very strongly. I mean, I got one opinion. I can make an emotion. If people don't like it, it doesn't fly. But I really feel as though that because, as we always say, 70% of our population are renters. And so because 70% of our population are renters, anybody can make anybody move. But that shouldn't have an impact. Like you said, as an alder, that's something totally different. These are elected positions, things of that sort. But in this particular situation, this is how I feel. So I want to make a motion. Now, if it fails, I'm okay.
So let's, if you
I'll
wouldn't
wait.
mind, if we can
I'll
have a
wait.
little bit more discussion on it, and then I'll come back to you for a
Yeah,
motion.
no problem,
Great.
no problem.
Thank you, appreciate your giving us some more latitude, Alder Morrison. I'll go to Alder Marchand, who was on the queue.
I mean, I agree that someone who's been appointed to the CRB should be able to fulfill their term, even if they have to move to a different district. The thing that it's, I guess I'm just thinking about the discussion we had during our charter revision process about, you know, people's lifetime terms, and when someone's appointed to a term, they are entitled to finish out that term. Now, we also had a discussion about if they fail to meet the qualifications, then they will no longer be able to serve in the body if they, you know, left the city of New Haven, for example. So for me, like, I just wonder how strong a qualification that language in section 2798, subsection 8 is. And if it were actually tested, would it be like, you know, someone moving a strong enough change in circumstance that it would disqualify that person? And would the city even, like, who would pursue that? Like, of course, in New Haven, people pursue all sorts of legal avenues all the time. So maybe somebody would. But it just seems, I'm trying to think through whether it's actually necessary to change the ordinance in order to make it allowable for someone who has moved to fill out their term, even if they move to a different policing district, because it's a different, you know, it's not like it's listed in a section that says qualified. Well, it's in membership, yeah. So anyway, that's what I'm thinking about, and I'm thinking about it out loud, and my thinking isn't terribly sharp. I just feel like there's competing things going on here. One is like the right for someone to fill out their term, and the other one is a change in circumstance that has some bearing on their qualification. You know, and I see that more as a qualification than it is like they're representing the district, because, you know, police districts are much larger than wards, and these folks don't have the same representational mandate we do, for example. But they do have, you know, I see it as a qualification. For how strong that qualification is, I think is kind of a point that I'm going to ponder. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Marchand.
Go ahead.
Are you gonna make a motion or more discussion?
I wanted more discussion.
Okay.
Since you're discussion.
Yep. So let me go to Alder Rodriguez. She hasn't said anything yet. Then I'll go to you, Alder Morrison, and then I'll go to Alder Sabin, and then we're all going to get a pizza because I'm getting really hungry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. taking into account the boards and how they're made up, there are some significant boards that require certain individuals to serve to ensure that we have them. For example, the Board of Education. They have certain individuals that that have to be there on that board. And taking into account the Civilian Review Board, it is extremely significant that we have as many people that can serve. And we had the administrator come here and say that there are people on ready and that have served. And there's a lot of work to do in the Civilian Review Board, the records, the review of the records, the investigations, there's a lot to do. And so I think it would be more significant to ensure that that body has the members necessary to do the function and to do the work, and that we be able to build that board as soon as possible. There's people already missing, but yet there's a list that's waiting to serve. So this is discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Alder Morrison and then Alder Saber.
So, two things I was looking at. Again, I go back to the putting that little caveat in there saying that if you move, you still can finish out your term. But then I'm also looking at the fact that we have membership at large. And if a person had to move, they would kind of fall in that membership at large arena, as it was testified, I believe. Here it says 2 at large, but I thought it was testified that as a board, we have 4 at large, and we only have 2 that are currently in the positions. And so, again, I mean, whatever way you want to slice it, I just want a person to be able to continue with their current term, regardless of, where they live, if they're forced to move. So I just wanted to say that, because when you look at section 2-78 membership under A, it says 2 at-large members, but I thought it was testified to 4. So that's what I have to say. So I'll just wait for my motion, but I'm done.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. Alder Saber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with my colleague. I guess I think that looking at the language in 2798A, the fact that it says that the board will consist of members no more than 15 and shall at a minimum consist of members selected as follows, that seems to me, because it says at a minimum, that means that there could be, I think, 2 members in one policing district. And then as Alder Morrison mentioned, the fact that there are also the 2 at-large members. I think, so I guess my comment is that I think that the existing language would allow somebody who moves into a different district to continue to serve. And I guess my additional comment is just that I think we could maybe add a specific language to state that. It also can be helpful, even if we don't add that language, if we state that, it becomes part of the legislative record, is my understanding, and that has some weight as well. But I think that it could be valuable to just clarify, given that we're having all this discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Alder Rodriguez. If you could
Again,
grab that mic.
in the section 2798 membership, A, and on the first line, it says the Civilian Review Board shall consist of a number of members with no more than 15. So while we can consider at a minimum, we have 15 districts. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We have 10 districts.
10 districts, my apologies.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, if I make a comment, to Alder Marchand's point, I know some people may disagree with me, but when I read this, when they're selected, they have to be from, the policing district. There is nothing in there stating that they have to continue to reside. In New Haven, yes, but not in that police district. Also to Alder Rodriguez's point, I believe there's 10 policing districts. So that's 10. There's a Board of Alders representative and the 2 at large appointed by the Board of Alders. So if someone was to feel like that they need to resign because they moved out of the policing district, it leaves the mayor 2 other positions that he could move them into. And then, that way that policing district, if they're already represented by someone from that policing district, would have 2 people. But it leaves the mayor with those 2 positions they both could serve if they felt like they needed to resign, and then he could appoint someone else from the policing district they vacated.
Thank you. Alder Morrison.
I know you're getting tired.
No, I'm really
Yeah.
thinking because
So
I don't want to create something
I look at this,
unnecessary.
if the 6 of us are sitting here and having a hard time with determining, can they stay? Do they gotta go? The group really is gonna have a hard time trying to interpret. And so, like I said, I don't know if you can even put it in parentheses as a note to say, if, someone moves or, however you want to list it. I think we have to be very intentional and direct so people understand, because I know of people who had to leave, felt like they had to leave because of certain circumstances. And if we're not very clear in our documentation about that, then it's just left up to interpretation. And so that's why I keep beating this dead horse.
I see where you're coming from now. I understand.
You see, thank you.
I
I know
understand.
I wasn't crazy.
No, I didn't say you're crazy. I'm just trying to get my head around it, but I understand because I understand what you're talking about. Is there any more discussion? Is there a motion? Alder Morrison.
I have my motion, and I'm not as sure if I'm saying it right, so please correct me. But my motion is that
So you want to start with
I move to amend Section A to include language that speaks to the, given a current member the ability to finish out their term on this board if they have to move. And I'm not sure that came out right, but that is my.
That's the idea. So now let's formulate it into language that we can write down.
Okay.
Yep. We're gonna work this out.
Yeah, you're gonna figure it out, Chair. So I move to amend Section 2798 membership, letter A, to include language that specifically states that a member can complete their term if in a position of needing to change resident location or policing district. Because the policing district language is still there. So language that will allow a member to continue to finish out their term if they have to move from one policing district to another. Is that more of a sentence, or is it still a concept?
I'm writing it down.
Okay.
I'm trying to write faster than Alder Marchand. Did you want to add a circumstance or just?
Yeah, the circumstance if the person had to move. or if they moved out of the area. Not even have to, if they moved out of the area, that they will be allowed to continue to complete their term.
As long as they continue to reside in the city.
As long as they, right,
Yeah.
as long as they
So that's
continue.
already there, right?
I have an idea, if I
Okay.
may offer it as a friendly amendment, which would be, I think we would need to make this another subsection. So we can make it subsection B and remove and re-letter the ones after it. And it could read, a non-at-large member who moves from one policing district to a different policing district may complete the term to which that member was appointed.
Yes. Yes. Say that again.
A non-at-large member who moves from one policing district to a different policing district may complete the term to which that member was appointed.
Yes. I
Because we have at-large people who this wouldn't apply to.
Exactly. I accept your friendly.
Second.
Okay.
That's she accepted my friend.
Yep, is there any further discussion?
I second the motion to amend.
Well, no, it's a friendly, she accepted.
I accepted the friendly.
Yeah.
And so
So
was it
we're all set.
Oh, okay.
And any further discussion
Mr. Chair. can
on
we-
this item?
Yes, on this
Okay.
item.
Yes, ma'am.
Can we visit the language?
You want to hear it again?
Can we revisit? It may be a lot shorter if we do it this way.
You want to amend the language?
Yeah, just the language.
So you want to make a friendly amendment to the friendly amendment?
I think she wants to
Revisit
propose
the
a different
language.
wording and see if it could be friendly.
In the same section 27798 membership, the Civilian Review Board shall consist of a number of members with no more than 15 and shall at a minimum consist of members selected as follows. One member from each of the police districts in the city of New Haven and allowed to complete their term if moved to another district in New Haven, comma, one member of the Board of Alders and, comma, at least, comma, 2 at-large members.
So I hear the spirit of what you just said, Alder, but I like the friendly amendment that Alder Mashan made, making section B, because it made it tighter. It made it tighter because it's its own section that really speaks to the fact that if a person is in that role and they move somewhere else in New Haven and they are an identified policing district person, they can continue with their term. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Alder Morrison.
I like,
Thank you, Alder Mashan.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of creating this subsection B in regards to members being able to move from one police district to another and continue to serve out their term, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay, the amendment passes. We're back to the item as amended. Is there further discussion? Alderman Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So far we've dealt with quorum issue, we've dealt with removing the CMT as an essential part of the bringing forward of eligible candidates, potential nominees. But tonight we heard testimony from the chair of the CRB and the attorney advocating that we make many more changes. involving the issue of redaction of material that's provided to the CRB regarding the timing of when the CRB should be involved in the review process. I think we need to take more time to think through the issues involved with doing that. I think the fact that there's not alignment yet with the police leadership, there's definitely not alignment with the Labor Relations Department. I think it would just bode much better for the CRB's future operation if those other changes that were well argued tonight had stronger alignment from those other key stakeholders. And so at this time, I'm not going to propose any further amendments. And I think we should move forward with the version that we've talked about this evening. But I think, excuse me, I think that the discussions that have begun among the leadership and staff of the CRB and the leadership of the police department and with other city staff, Labor Relations Corporation Council, I think those discussions should continue. And, if there's a future submission that has strong alignment across all those stakeholders, I think it would be important for this body to consider them. But at this point, I wouldn't recommend adopting those changes at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the item as amended?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Alder Rodriguez.
just a point of clarity. Under section 2802 investigations, section E, where it says the police chief shall not make a decision regarding the disposition of a civilian complaint until she or he has received the written findings and recommendations of both the Civilian Review Board and the Internal Affairs Division. Is this something that we could further look at and consider in terms of any ramifications or benefits, since we are looking at the ordinance and we are trying to improve it? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm not sure that I'm following. So the only addition well, we have a couple of additions that are in red, but it doesn't really change the spirit of what this first thing says, is that they want something in writing, unless you're speaking of including the very new section in blue.
What I am saying is that this section, it requires that the police chief receive written findings and recommendations of both the Civilian Review Board and Internal Affairs Division before making a decision regarding the disposition of a civilian complaint. What I'm saying is that we should consider looking at this and seeing how it impacts. Because it is here and it is something that is required since it's part of the ordinance. Since we are looking at the ordinance and we are improving it, that I believe that really does need to be looked at before finalizing and making a decision. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are you suggesting a motion on this item, or just something that we should?
It's up for discussion with the team here.
I don't have a motion. Is there a motion on this item?
No. Let's get that.
Let's move forward. Okay, is there any further discussion on the item as amended? Is anyone going to talk about the overall CRB ordinance? Just to kind of explain what we're doing at this point. Okay, Alder Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just repeat a little bit of what I said before, which is that we've made changes related to the process of appointing people. We've made changes to the quorum. to clear some of the operational hurdles that have prevented the panel from functioning as smoothly as it could and it made it more difficult to fill vacant seats, made it more difficult to conduct business if a certain number of people are not able to be there. Those are important operational details, and I'm glad that we had the assistance of our able staff in formulating those amendments. I think that's all that we should do for now. But the discussions may continue, and we can hear back from them, and hopefully there'll be more alignment among the key stakeholders. But I think what we're doing already, even though the number of words changing is much smaller, hopefully we'll have a significant operational impact because it is important for this body to function well. It took a lot of time and effort, as colleagues will remember, to craft this ordinance and to get buy-in from a wide range of very actively engaged stakeholders. It was no small feat for this body to pass the ordinance, and we have a long-term interest as public servants to see this body be successful, and we should pay close attention to its operations in the future. Having said all that, I would encourage colleagues to vote in favor to vote for a favorable recommendation to the board of the item as it has been amended. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Marchand. Is there any further discussion? Alder Rodriguez.
Thank you. Taking into account what Attorney Stubbs shared and also the administrator, and the fact of the work that's being done through the Civilian Review Board and the police department, and seeing that throughout the year they have come before us on a number of occasions, I believe that the Civilian Review Board is becoming something better, and stronger, that in the long run, our police department and all those in police enforcement, it's going to work better for New Haven, that we have this, and that we have this board that is strong, and hopefully, as the gentleman spoke and said, that there's something for the residents, that the residents are at the table regarding the matters that impact them directly. So I just wanted to share that, the input of everyone, the police department, the Civilian Review Board, and us and the community. I believe that's going to be very good for us in the long run. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll just add on quickly. It may seem like we've made small changes, but they are very significant. And the changes are to enable the Civilian Review Board to operate. And I think that's very significant. I also want to state that we're not finished with this. There will be some more discussion. The Civilian Review Board is one of the boards that we have decided in our charter revision that will come out of charter revision. And so we'll be looking at some portions of that also to see if any further amendments are necessary, which will also constitute further public hearings about it. And so that gives us a chance to get some things done now, and we'll possibly work on getting some things done a little bit down the road as we consider the other boards and commissions that are going to be coming out of our city charter and entering into our code of ordinances. So with that, if there's no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay, the ayes have it. We'll give this a favorable recommendation to the full board of Alders, Alder Marchand.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
And moved and seconded. Any discussion on adjourning? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are dismissed.
Yeah.
That last point you brought up, can you just explain that to me? It's out of the charter of the ordinance. Is this in the charter?
Charter revision. I mean,
The
CRB is in our charter.
in the charter. And there's the notice, but I just don't have a copy. Please click this. So is it
There are several boards and commissions that we have voted on during that process of our charter revision to move out of the charter and move into the code of ordinances. Civilian review ordinance. And so during that process of moving things over to our code of ordinance,